Welcome to this explainer. The next time you grab a shopping cart and just wander down the aisles of your local grocery store, I really want you to stop and realize something absolutely fascinating. You are literally stepping right into the middle of this massive, invisible web of economic forces. Every single item you see, from the fresh produce to those packaged meats, it's all sitting on that specific shelf at that exact price because of a hidden system. A whole system of rules, data, and sorting mechanisms. So today we're going to expose those unseen forces that completely dictate what ends up in your cart.
To really wrap our heads around this, let's start with something super familiar. Think about the labels you see every single day, right? When you look at a cut of meat and it proudly shows off a specific quality grade, or say you grab a carton of milk that says reduced fat, well, who actually decides that? How does the steak actually earn its title? It's not just some clever marketing buzzword dreamed up by a farmer. It's actually the result of a really rigorous, highly organized framework that kicks off way before that product ever hits the store.
Okay, let's dive into this. When we consider official USDA beef grades, they are based almost entirely on a visual assessment of fat marbling. There is a stark difference between cuts. The system strictly separates a cut with just slight marbling from one with moderately abundant fat. The higher the fat content woven right through the meat, the higher the grade it gets. And this is a huge deal, because this dictates the price the farmer gets paid, which fancy restaurant buys it, and ultimately how much you pay at the register. It's literally a precise visual science.
And hey, it's not just meat. Even something as incredibly simple as milk is strictly governed by FDA milk categories. The difference between reduced fat and skim is absolutely not a casual suggestion. Homogenized whole milk, it has to hit at least 3.25% fat. Meanwhile, fat-free or skim milk must contain less than 0.5% fat, and both require exactly 8.25% solids non-fat. So this completely proves that what we're dealing with isn't some random assortment of goods, it is a highly calibrated, totally invisible system of standards.
Moving on to Section 1, Decoding Your Groceries, focusing on the information loop. All right, Section 2, Market Intel Power. We're looking at the data driving agriculture.
We call this market intelligence. Simply put, this is the process of gathering, analyzing, and interpreting information relevant to a specific agricultural market. You can really think of it as the absolute lifeblood of agriculture. It's the exact thing that helps everyone, from a local fruit farmer in Colentin looking to plant their next crop, all the way up to massive multinational agribusinesses make informed, strategic choices instead of just, guessing.
Let's move to and see how this builds across 4 very specific steps. First up, we have data collection, which is just gathering the raw numbers out in the field. Second is data analysis, where we actually start looking for patterns, like, say, calculating average prices. Third is interpretation. This is all about making sense of those patterns, like trying to correlate historical durian prices in Irelandis with local rainfall. And finally, dissemination. This is where that interpreted data is shared out with the world, maybe as actionable weekly price updates for paddy farmers so they know exactly when it's best to sell.
But you might be wondering, where does all this intelligence actually come from? Well, it's basically split into 2 main buckets. Primary sources are your raw, on-the-ground data. This means actually going out and surveying consumers about their fruit preferences, or doing first-hand interviews with retailers to really gauge vegetable demand. Then you have secondary sources. These are the massive, already existing databases. Think deep statistical records maintained by government marketing authorities, like FAMA, the Federal Agricultural Marketing Authority in Malaysia, or broad academic research on consumer behavior.
So why does this matter to you and me? Simply because it completely removes the guesswork. Imagine you're a farmer trying to decide where to send your harvest. If market intelligence tells you that the wholesale price for tomatoes is currently surging in Kuala Lumpur but dropping down in Johor Bahru, you are instantly empowered to route your trucks straight to KL. It maximizes returns and mitigates the risk of financial loss. This data shapes government food policy, identifies when we suddenly all want organic produce, and honestly, it keeps the entire supply chain stable.
Which brings us to Section 3, Creating the Rulebook, or Standardizing Agriculture.
This introduces a massive concept: standardization. This is the establishment of uniform criteria for agricultural products. Honestly, think of standardization as the ultimate common language of global food. It's exactly what reduces transaction costs and builds trust. Because of standardized criteria for things like size, weight, and even moisture content, a buyer sitting in an office in Singapore can purchase a massive shipment of grade A Malaysian papaya and know exactly what is going to arrive off the boat. No physical inspection required.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how complex this rulebook really has to be. Think about comparing assorted fresh peppers with fresh fish. These are wildly diverse products, right?
The standards for a bell pepper might revolve entirely around color uniformity, shape, and making sure there are no bruises. But the standards for fisheries products? That's going to involve strict sanitation, weight, and freshness indicators. Every single category of food requires its own unique, highly detailed set of standardization criteria just to be traded safely and efficiently.
And notice how standardization extends all the way down to the final packaged product. If you consider something like Ramley-branded frankfurters, you can see how strict standardization dictates literally everything. It's not just about the shape of the meat. We're talking about the mandatory ingredient lists, specific weight declarations, halal certifications, and those official government veteran inspection logos on the packaging. Standardization ensures that when you reach for a brand, you get a perfectly consistent, safe product every single time.
All right, moving to Section 4, Sorting the Harvest, all about the grading process.
So this is where grading comes into play. If standardization is the theoretical rule book sitting on a desk somewhere, grading is the actual physical sorting mechanism happening out on the farm and in the factory. It is the real-world process of evaluating agricultural products against those defined standards and then physically throwing them into different buckets, or grades, based on their quality. Without the clear, strict rules of standardization, grading would just be a completely subjective, chaotic mess.
Grading serves some incredibly vital purposes for all of us. Primarily, it allows for market segmentation and, crucially, it minimizes waste. For example, when apples are graded, the flawless, premium, extra fancy apples are sent straight to high-end supermarkets where people are happy to pay top dollar. But the apples with slight blemishes or maybe some weird shapes, they absolutely aren't thrown away. Because they're accurately graded as a lower tier, they get efficiently routed to processing plants to become apple juice or applesauce. It's brilliant. Farmers get fairly compensated for their best work, and perfectly edible food avoids the landfill.
To really hammer home why this is so critical, let's look at the famous cautionary tale of the Bulgarian cannery. So new owners bought an old government tomato cannery and they eagerly started drawing up contracts with newly independent farmers. They specified the price, the exact quantity of tomatoes they wanted, the chemicals allowed, even the variety of the plant. But they completely forgot to specify quality standards and grading in the contract. And what happens when you guarantee a price for a set quantity without actually demanding a grade? You get a chaotic, unusable mix of unripe, overripe, and damaged tomatoes that totally ruins your processing line. Grading is for sure not optional. It is absolutely essential.
Let's wrap it up with Section 5, Agricultural Synergy, where Intel meets standards.
So the crucial point is that this whole system forms a perfect synergistic loop. Market intelligence actively informs the standards, meaning if the data shows consumers suddenly demand pesticide-free produce, well, the government is going to write new standardized rules for what counts as organic. Conversely, standards totally enhance intelligence. Once products are strictly graded into categories like grade A or grade B, it becomes incredibly easy for market researchers to accurately track prices and forecast trends based on those specific grades. Honestly, one just cannot exist effectively without the other.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating thought to take away. We saw earlier that beef is graded higher based on having more fat marbling. But think about this. What happens if sudden, massive consumer demand pushes for leaner meat for health reasons? That simple, everyday shift in preference would ripple backward. It would force the market intelligence data to change, which would rewrite the official standardization rulebooks and completely alter how farmers grade and even breed their cattle. This invisible system governing your groceries is immensely powerful, but it's always listening to you. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and the next time you're in the aisle, I really hope you see those shelves in a whole new light.